Good, Ellen's streaming, so just give us 5 and then go live.
Good afternoon. My name is Marla McGinnis, and I will be your moderator for today's media availability. Joining us today are Jason Mew from the Nova Scotia Emergency Management Office, Matt Drover from Nova Scotia Power, Lieutenant Colonel Adam Poirier, the Immediate Response Unit Commander in Cape Breton with the Canadian Armed Forces, Christina Lamy from the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Erica Fleck from Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency, and Bill Lawler, Director of Government Relations with the Canadian Red Cross. Mr. Mew will start us off today with a couple brief comments. Go ahead, Mr. Mew.
Thanks, Marla. Just want to thank everyone who's taking part in this call today. Very much appreciated. As you know, progress continues, and we will be continuing to respond to those impacts as the days progress. Just trying to get the message out there to everyone to stay off the roads if at all possible, and if you have to be on the road, to be very careful and keep a lookout for those that are working around the roads as regards to Nova Scotia Power and anybody else that you might see trying to help with the restorations. Once again, don't go near any electrical wires or down poles because you should treat them all as if they're electrified, just for people's general safety. Please report any outages to Nova Scotia Power so that they can respond as quickly as they can. Just want to give everyone some information in regards that we are looking to bringing more people in. They are presently en route, so there are more technicians and people coming to Nova Scotia to assist. And then applications for support that the Premier announced will be available later this week, and those will be readily available through Nurse Service Nova Scotia on various websites. So thank you very much. Over to you, Marla.
Thank you very much, Jason. We'll now take questions from reporters. We'll be using the one question, one follow-up format today. Please remember when I call your name to identify who your question is for. We'll start with Stuart Peddle with the Chronicle Herald. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hi there. I guess this would be for Mr. Drover with NSP. We'd heard that NSP is having trouble getting replacement poles. Is that correct? Is that one of the issues that your crews are dealing with?
Actually, we aren't having any trouble getting poles. We have lots of poles on hand that we've been bringing in every day since the storm began. In preparation, we had thousands of poles in the province. So far, no issues with the poles, other than the fact that we do have many to replace, and that's where we're focusing our efforts. But so far, no issues. Okay,
I guess that was a false rumor came to our newsroom. The other thing, I guess, would be, I know we're still in the middle of cleanup process and the process of helping people. Is there a timeline for when perhaps a postmortem of how things went is going to start or begin, or is that a little ways down the road? I guess it's open to whoever.
As well, or?
I guess it's open for whoever wishes to respond.
Sure, I can start. Like any incident or exercise that we're involved in at Nova Scotia EMO, we always have an after-action report because we're looking to learn from any mistakes or to enhance our ability to respond. So certainly we will have one, and we will involve all our critical infrastructure and our partners in that report.
Okay, next we'll go to Jillian Cormier with All Nova Scotia. Go ahead, Jillian.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is for Matt Drover. Mr. Drover, have you been bringing in linemen from Florida as well, from Emera's other operations?
Not from Florida, definitely all over Canada, Ontario, Quebec, all of Atlantic Canada, and all the New England states. We've been focusing our efforts on those that can get here the fastest, and obviously to get from Florida would take a significant amount of time. So far, nobody from Florida.
Jillian, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. Do you expect to send anyone from Nova Scotia in the Fiona response down to the U.S. For Hurricane Ian?
Not at this time. Our efforts are solely focused on cleaning up after Fiona here in Nova Scotia. This is an all-hands-on-deck approach, and our crews are working around the clock to restore power. So we will not be leaving the province.
Thank you.
Before we go to our next question, just for the reporters that are saying they're having trouble with the view, just make sure you're in gallery view versus speaker view, and that should solve your problem. Next, we'll go to Jean Laroche with CBC. Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Jason Mew. Jason, we've been hearing from people with physical and mental disabilities who cannot leave their homes. They feel isolated and really forgotten. What is in the emergency plans for the province to help vulnerable people like these in this kind of situation? Because we know other places have a vulnerable persons registry, so they know, we know, authorities know exactly where these people are.
Yeah, definitely. So we work with the municipalities to support them, looking at vulnerable populations. If anyone out there does need assistance, by all means, call 211, and we'll certainly get to them as soon as possible. We do have teams that are actively in throughout Nova Scotia doing wellness checks. So we just need them to reach out to either to their municipality or call 211, and we'll have someone check on them.
John, do you have a follow-up question?
Next question is for Lieutenant Colonel Poirier. The province requested more help, according to your minister, Ms. Anand, who was speaking this morning in Ottawa. She says there are now 150 here. Is that the extra help that the government asked, the extent of it? As a first question. The second, she talked about help for communities in the Truro area. Can you talk a little bit about whether there'll be a deployment there and what that will look like? So those two questions, please.
Thank you. So I'll speak first to what we currently have in Cape Breton. So we currently have 124 people operating and supporting on the island at this time, primarily in Glace Bay and Birch Grove, operating and executing tasks today. With respect to Truro and then along the New Glasgow, Pictou, and Antigonish area, we have teams that are out there conducting assessments. They're ongoing right now, and they owe me feedback later on this evening to understand what the scope and what the requirements are and how we'll be able to support in that region.
Okay, next we'll go to Alicia Drost with Global. Go ahead, Alicia.
Hi, I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if anyone's able to answer this, but perhaps EMO, in terms of telecommunications, do we have any more information on how many people were without cell service or are still without cell service at this point, and maybe the areas that are being most impacted? Are we still in I guess, communication with cell providers?
Sure. So I can answer that. All the cell providers and all the telcos are physically in our provincial coordination center as we're speaking here today, and obviously working through those issues and trying to get those restorations up as quickly as possible. But no, I don't have information on specific towers. That'd be something you'd have to go to the individual companies for that information.
Alicia, do you have a follow-up question?
I guess I'm just kind of wondering why they're not part of these briefings if they are in the emergency command centers, just so we could kind of get a better idea rather than trying to reach out to them each individually. But in the meantime, I'm also just going to ask, in terms of the military, can we get more details on how many military members are currently in Nova Scotia, how they're spread out across the province, and just what they're doing?
I'm going to assume that question was directed towards me, so I will answer it. So we, like I mentioned previously, we have 126 personnel that are currently in Cape Breton. And then we have approximately 59 people that are operating out of Truro at this time. Part of that element that is in Truro, approximately 20, are my headquarters. So they're the one that they're coordinating and supporting me with, providing me situational awareness of what's happening, throughout the province. And I'm also responsible for the efforts in PEI as well. So we're coordinating that. What I also have currently stationed out of Truro is an element of 42 personnel, which are right now conducting assessments between Truro up through Antigonish and Pictou. So between those two, approximately 165, or correction, about 180 is total, is what we currently have in the province.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Ian Nathanson with the Cape Breton Post. Go ahead, Ian.
Hi, thanks. My message for Lieutenant Colonel Poirier. I imagine that your crews were first deployed into the Glace Bay and Birch Grove area. Can you comment on what you've seen and sort of the challenges that you were facing?
So I traveled just before this call. I was actually down in Glace Bay trying to get an understanding of what I was seeing. The primary, a lot of down trees hanging in power lines, a lot of down power lines. Those were kind of the key things that I saw, and the primary support that my soldiers were providing to that was supporting Nova Scotia Power with debris removal, chainsaw type operations to really clear some of these trees.
Ian, do you have a follow-up question?
Although it's an early estimation, and this can be also for Christina Laney as well, do you anticipate at this stage reaching the end of the state emergency, or are you going to plan to go beyond that?
That would be a day-by-day decision from mayor and council. Ultimately, where I think the current state of emergency, state of local emergency expires on Saturday. We're really excited and hopeful to see the deployment that happened today with Nova Scotia Power and the military and even our own crews, just really tackling the really difficult spots that are holding back the power restoration. So that we're hopeful that we will come to the end of the state of emergency sooner than later. But at this time, we are definitely still in a crisis situation.
Great, thank you.
Next, we'll go to Dakshana Bhaskar-Murty from the Globe and Mail. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. This is a question for Erica Flack. I wanted to know the status of tree removal by city crews. Like, how many trees has the city removed so far that have fallen?
I don't have today's numbers included, but we're well over 400 trees that were removed so far. But again, that work continues to go on until we're 100% clear.
And is there a timeline for? Sorry, that was my follow-up.
Yeah, no, well, the crews continue to work day and night as long as it's safe to do so, and they'll continue that until everything is clear.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll go to Paul Withers with CBC. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, I just want a question for Jason Muse. The question is something that was reported on by another organization this morning, and that is the impact of labor shortages on getting things like roofs repaired. Can you talk to me about what you know about what kind of impact labor shortages are having and will have on the ability of people to get roofs back on their houses?
I don't have any specific information regarding labor shortage in regards to carpenters or any other skilled trades. But as we all know, it's certainly been a struggle to find some of these skilled trades even during Dorian, or not during Dorian, but during COVID and specifically, after an emergency. But I wouldn't have that information on hand. Sorry.
Paul, do you have a follow-up question?
And my question for Mr. Drover is, Peter Gregg was saying earlier today that 2/3 of the province has been assessed for damage. Can you talk to me about what happens next there? Where are the areas that you don't know yet, the situation? Can you walk me through where that is?
Yeah, two things for that. So our big focus for the last few days has been on damage assessment and restoration. So getting a lay of the land, understanding the extent of the damage. And most of the areas that we've covered so far, which covers 2/3 of the province, have been those areas that we can get access to, places that we can get in, get our resources on the ground, and understand what our crews need to do for restoration. We've been working around the clock with that assessment. We've been using helicopters, drones, as well as foot patrols. And today and going forward, we're working with the military, like was described earlier, in Cape Breton, and really getting into those areas that are hard to reach. Most of those areas are in the eastern part of the province and really the Cape Breton Island section. There's lots of areas that still are inaccessible. And we're working with the military, Department of National Resources, clearing the trees that are in the way to get access in and then assess our infrastructure from there.
Thank you.
We do have time to go through for one more question each, so I'll go right back to the beginning with Stuart Peddle, Chronicle Herald. Stuart, do you have an additional question you'd like to ask?
Sure. So a lot of these down trees that are laying on lines, you mentioned, Mr. Muse and Mr. Drover earlier, that people should assume that those wires are alive. Is that often the case that those wires are in fact live, even though power has been knocked out by the damaged trees laying on the lines?
Go ahead, Matt.
So like Jason said, in all cases, assume that those lines are live from a safety perspective. It isn't common that they actually would be live. In most cases, if a pole or a wire is on the ground, it would not be live. But the best thing to do in all cases is to assume those lines are live and stay away from those and report them in Nova Scotia Power.
Thank you. Let's go back to Jillian Cormier with All Nova Scotia. Go ahead, Jillian.
Hi, Mr. Drover. Are you able to say yet that Fiona was worse than Dorian in terms of damage to the infrastructure?
Yes, the storm that we were preparing for with Fiona was one that was as intensive one and as widespread as Dorian. And that's definitely what we got. And through the damage assessment that we've done over the last few days, the impact to our infrastructure, to the trees within the province is definitely larger than Dorian. And because of that, we are mobilizing the largest restoration resource deployment that we ever have done in our company's history.
Let's go to Jean Laroche with CBC. Jean, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, let me pick up on Jillian's point with Mr. Drover. You have 1,000 people on the ground. Are you maxed out in terms of the number of crews that you can put towards this effort, or could you bring more in from outside? Or give me a picture of that, because I understand that at some point you max out. You can only do what you can do.
Great question. So we're actually up to 1,300 people on the ground right now, and we have more than 100 more on their way. Every day we are adding more. We have not reached that limit yet. We're actually breaking down crews to allow more to join the various pods that we have working on restoration. And all of those crews are being effective and restoring power as safely as possible. So we have not maxed out at this point.
Thank you. Alicia, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, I guess just kind of a follow up on the same thing. Are crews kind of working around the clock, and is it, I guess, continuously 1,300 people? Or like how is that divided?
So the number is always growing. It's definitely not going down. It is around the clock restoration. So through the night, we still have crews working. From a safety perspective, we obviously don't work people around the clock. People obviously rest, but the crews themselves, we always have crews working on restoration.
Let's go back to Ian Nathanson with the Cape Breton Post. Ian, do you have another question?
Another question for Lieutenant Colonel Poirier. Do we have a breakdown of what the number of troops are from different areas that are comprising the immediate response unit?
So I don't have the exact breakdown per unit, but I would say this is that 95% of the people that are supporting operations here in Cape Breton and in Nova Scotia writ large are from Nova Scotia, many of which themselves have been impacted by the hurricane. So they're doing great work on behalf of their community, understanding that their families are going through it as well. If I break it further and look at the remainder of my response force in PEI, for example, a substantial portion of that has come from my unit, because I am the immediate response unit for Atlantic Canada. A majority of my unit has gone there to support a small reserve element from the PEI regiment.
Okay, next we'll go back to Dakshana Bhaskara-Murty from the Globe and Mail. Dakshana, do you have another question? Okay, let's go on to Paul Withers with CBC. Paul, do you have another question?
I do. I would like to know whether or not this is either for EMO or for the military. And Lieutenant Poirier, Colonel Poirier, the question I have is, will the military be moving into Pictou Antigonish area along the Northumberland Strait, where, while maybe not as massively extensive as Cape Breton, there is a horrific situation underway there? Is the military going to that part of Nova Scotia?
I'll let the military speak to their operations. Go ahead, sir.
So as I mentioned previously, we're currently conducting assessments in that region. I have a small detachments. Small is probably the wrong word. I have approximately a detachment of 40 people conducting assessments to understand the gravity and the scope of the work that's required. And based off that, I'll be able to take that information and make recommendations to my boss in terms of what additional resources we need.
Do you know when you might make that decision?
I would caution that that's fairly preliminary at this stage. I know that my team owes me some additional results today, with the understanding that I will talk to my boss either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all the time we have today. Thank you very much to our participants for joining us, and continue to stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.